Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Wallsend history story. This week I am covering the story of the Olympic roller rink as it was known when it was first built, or as it is probably better known, the stadium on the green. I hope you will find it interesting as it does have quite a lot of history to it. Unfortunately, there are no old photos that I am able to use of this building due to copyright issues. So I hope you will still enjoy it with location photos, newspaper transcriptions and other drawings. Roller skating had been around for many years, but from around 1908 it became very popular in the UK, and most towns and cities built roller rinks to meet the demand. Wallsend was no different, although it did take a little bit longer before ours was built compared to other areas. Many newspaper articles of the time said they were amazed that the roller rink craze had not reached Wallsend sooner. The builder and proprietor of the Olympic skating rink was Mr. William Ridley. He was originally from Consett and he was a well-respected builder and contractor. Obviously, as with all buildings, there would have been planning discussions, but as this is probably going to be quite a long story to begin with, as there's so much history to go with the building, I won't include that part in this story. In late 1910, Mr. Ridley applied for music, dancing and cinema licenses for the new rink at Wallsend. He was intending to show pictures between the skating times. The licenses that he had applied for were all granted. The building was going to be huge. The sizes I will give with the opening details, but it was said that it would be big enough to hold 10,000 visitors. Even before the building was finished and opened, the newspapers of the time were not hopeful of it doing well, as they said rinks of a similar size in Newcastle were only doing a moderate business. However, they did wish Mr. Ridley well and hoped he would succeed, as they said that they were most impressed that he was still going ahead with his plans despite suffering with a very serious illness at the time. In November of 1910, on a Wednesday, the Olympic skating rink was officially opened in the presence of thousands of people from the town. The building was said to be one of the largest in the northeast and was described at the time as being situated in Northview, Wallsend, but it was also mentioned that it did extend to the village green. The description was as follows. The length of the building is 300 feet and the width is 97 feet. Some articles do say that the width is 100 feet, and it is 42 feet high. There is a skating area of 264 feet long and 75 feet wide, with a 10-foot wide passage wall all round the skating area. Above the skating area is a 10-foot wide balcony around the whole building, with 4 access staircases to the balcony. The main entrance is on Northview and there are 5 emergency exits. There is a cafe at one side of the rink and the orchestra is situated on one side of the balcony, and there is also a large organ on the opposite side to the orchestra. Cloakrooms, ladies' retiring rooms, skate rooms, which I assume would be the place that you got your skates from if you did not have your own, and a kitchen for the use of the staff are all included inside the building. Again, somewhat similar to the Wallsend Cafe, there doesn't seem to be any mention of men's toilets. The cinema room is situated on the first floor and the whole building is lit by electricity. This is often mentioned as electricity is still quite new at the time, so any building that has this is seen as being very advanced. The building is constructed to hopefully reduce noise, and the walls are brick and the skating floor area is the finest maple, which is resting on solid concrete, and the roof is covered with Borden and Janasco patent roofing. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. It was said that it was without a doubt the best equipped and most luxurious rink in the country, and the architects were Messrs. Simpson and Lawson of Newcastle. The estimated cost of the building was said to be between £6,000 and £7,000, but there's no exact figure that was given in any of the articles that I have seen. The opening ceremony was performed by Alderman James Allen, and he was supported by Mr. William Ridley, who will be running the rink himself. Alderman Allen, on opening the rink, said it had only been 3 years ago that the people of Wallsend had been complaining about the lack of entertainment in the town. Since then, there had been 3 picture houses, a large theatre, and now a large skating rink all built. So he hoped that they would now be happy with the entertainment provided in the town. He said that some people had felt that the rink would never be built, but he felt, as I say, if anyone was able to do it, it would be Mr. Ridley, and he had indeed been correct. There were, of course, other reasons why Alderman Allen thought it would be a success, and one was the great tram and train services that came to Wallsend, bringing people from other areas to this marvellous new skating rink. Mr. Ridley also spoke, and he said he was pleased to see everyone at the opening, and he hoped that he would see them many more times in the future. Once the rink was officially opened, the rest of the afternoon was devoted to professional skaters to put on a display for those who were watching. Unfortunately, Mr. Ridley did not get the chance to see how well his rink performed, as on the 6th of December 1910 he sadly died. At the time, he was listed as living at 1 Northview in Wallsend. An announcement in the paper at the time stated that the rink was closed until further notice due to the death of the proprietor, and he was 49 years old, leaving a wife, Sarah, and a daughter, and at the time of his death he left an estate of around £12,000. His wife Sarah took over the running of the rink with the help of the manager, Mr. Knox, and in 1911 they held a fancy dress carnival in the rink where around 200 people took part, and also in 1911 Mr. James Cummings conducted a choir of around 6,000 people in the roller rink on the coronation of King George and Queen Mary. I can only begin to imagine how that must have sounded with that big domed roof. Sarah Ridley and her manager did try to make a success of the rink, but sadly by 1914 the building and contents were put up for sale. When the building was put up for sale, it also came with an extra piece of land which could be bought and extended onto if needed. Unfortunately, the building with contents did not sell as one, with very little interest being shown in the building itself. However, the auctioneer went on to sell the contents as a separate concern. This included the organ, 1,000 folding chairs and 500 bentwood chairs, and various other items such as mirrors and the fire extinguishers, and hundreds of pairs of roller skates made by Samuel Winslow. Samuel Winslow, as an extra piece of information, was the most widely used brand of the time, selling skates all over the world long after the man himself had died in 1894. There are no details of how much the contents sold for. It would seem that William Ridley and his grand plans for a skating rink in Wallsend had not worked out as he had hoped. The business had ended up with great debts. His wife had tried very hard to make it work after his death, but had ended up with many more debts to pay, and by 1915 a local paper reports that the debtors need to be paid as soon as possible, and that currently the roller rink is being leased by the army, and the army would appear to be using it as a recruitment site and also a holding area for soldiers to stay until they are posted elsewhere. The rink would eventually sell, but not before it made a huge dent in Mr. Ridley's estate, and when Sarah died in 1944, her estate was only £575. In 1917, the roller rink was sold for around £3,000 to what was described as a private syndicate. And in 1920, the roller rink reopened under the name of the Wallsend Stadium, under the ownership of the Tyneside Stadium Company. It was now to be used for boxing events, And although there was no official opening, the first night opened with a 6-round bout between two fighters from Newcastle known as Young Johnson and Young Gordon, which was followed by various other fights too numerous to mention here. And although it would seem that the opening and for a while afterwards the stadium was popular, the interest clearly faded, as by 1922 the building was once more up for sale. And at this time, Wallsend Town Council refused the option to buy the building for £11,000 with the view to turning it into an indoor public market. By 1923, the building was bought by the Daimler company, who had another depot in Newcastle. The building was to be used to rebuild and repair Daimler cars. The article of 1923 does not say the cars are built there from scratch, which was often something that I had heard in the past. It was said that they would keep details of all the owners of the cars, and it sounded like their service histories for future reference if needed. Daimler, it seems, did not stay there for long either, as by 1925 the building was once more up for sale. In most articles, the building is known as the Stadium, which is the name I knew it by when I was growing up in Wallsend, but some articles also refer to it as the Daimler Building. The next owner of the stadium was the government, who bought the building to use as a training centre for the unemployed. However, no details in the articles I have seen discuss how much it was sold for. Of all its many uses, this was one that would last for several years. It would be known as the Ministry of Labour Training Centre, and it was aimed mostly at the unemployed between the ages of 19 and 25 to learn skills such as bricklaying, plastering and painting and decorating, and it would also help ex-servicemen up to the age of 29. And as of 1926 there were 420 young men from all over Tyneside on a 6-month course at the stadium, and they would work a 44-hour week and be provided with one hot meal a day. On top of their unemployment allowance, each trainee would receive £0.50, and if they lived more than 2 miles away from Wallsend, they would also get a travelling allowance. It would seem to be a very popular scheme, as it was said many hundreds of young men had applied to take part in the courses on offer. The training centre was certainly still very much in use in 1945, as it was at the time involved in a dispute over money paid to trainees who had previously been on active service during World War II. It would seem that they felt they deserved a slightly higher payment than what was on offer, but I did not find any articles detailing the outcome of the dispute. Eventually the demand for the training centre would drop, and the stadium would live out its final years as a storage area for paperwork from the DHSS. By 1986 plans were being discussed to demolish the stadium. However, some locals had hoped it could be turned into an indoor bowling area, but it was stated by the council that the building was by then quite run down, and it could cost in excess of £1 million to bring it up to standard for use by the public, so this idea never really got off the ground. The land that the stadium had been built on had previously been housing, and it was eventually agreed to demolish the stadium and return it back to housing. But this was also not a simple task. In 1987, house builders Barratt's had their plans to build 24 flats on the site rejected. This rejection was upheld at the central government on appeal. It was stated that 24 flats was too many and not in keeping with the area and not what was wanted on the green. Barratt's tried again, and from what I could see they reduced the build to 23 flats and houses, and this was also rejected. I have to say that I did kind of laugh at that. If 24 was too many, dropping it by one wasn't really going to work. Eventually, in 1988, a much lower amount of 5 detached houses was agreed to, and the land where the White House once stood, which later became the roller rink and then the stadium, once more became houses. The area on the North View side also got planning approval, and that became houses too. These days, if you walk along North View or on the green, it's hard to remember how it used to look, and it kind of feels like those houses have always been there. And as much as the stadium and the dole offices that stood beside it were part of my childhood, I think I very definitely prefer the view today. I hope that you have found this story interesting. I was quite amazed at the varied uses the old building had had, and how it had played its part both during the war and in training the unemployed to help them to get work or to return to work after fighting in World War II. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.